The morning sun rose over Dust Haven like a slow fire, the kind that burned the edge of the desert gold. The small frontier town stirred to life with the groan of wagon wheels, the bark of dogs, and the call of a blacksmith already hard at work. Out beyond the last line of wooden shacks and the general store, a lone figure waited at the stage stop. A tall, broad-shouldered rancher whose shirt was already stained with dust and work. Wyatt Marin squinted against the glare, his hat tilted low, his stance still and patient as a stone. The stagecoach was late, as usual. He hadn't been expecting it, but the driver had flagged him down the night before, saying there'd be a delivery meant for him. A delivery, Wyatt thought grimly, that he hadn't asked for. Nothing good ever came uninvited to his ranch. When the coach finally rumbled in, it came in a cloud of red dust and noise, horses snorting, wheels grinding against the dry earth. The driver, a weathered man with a gray beard, jumped down with a grunt. "Mornin', Marin," he said, brushing his hands on his vest. "Got something for you?" Wyatt frowned. "Didn't order nothing." The driver gave a crooked smile and jerked his thumb toward the carriage. "Ain't no package. It's a person." Before Wyatt could ask, the door creaked open. Out stepped a small girl, no more than 10, maybe younger. Her clothes were plain and dusty, her hair a tangled chestnut braid that had long since lost its ribbon. She clutched a worn satchel to her chest and stood quietly beside the coach, watching him with wide gray eyes that seemed to hold both fear and something else. Wyatt blinked, completely thrown. "Now hold on. Who's she supposed to be?" The driver dug into his coat pocket and handed over a folded envelope. "Letter says she's kin to you. Through your wife." Wyatt froze. The word wife hit him like a hammer. His gaze flicked to the horizon, toward the ranch house that stood alone against the open plain. The same house that had gone silent the day Clara died 3 years back. He took the letter without a word, tore it open with calloused fingers. The handwriting inside was neat, but tired. "Mr. Marin, this is Lila. She's the daughter of Clara's sister, Ellen. Ellen passed this winter from the fever. The girl hasn't spoken a word since. We've done all we can. She has no family left. You were mentioned as her closest kin, God. Bless you for taking her in." The note was signed by a Reverend Thompson, from some small town he'd never heard of. Wyatt read it twice, before folding it slowly and tucking it into his vest. He looked down at the girl again. She hadn't moved. She stood as still as the fence post beside her, clutching her satchel, eyes fixed somewhere between his boots and the ground. "She don't talk, huh?" he said quietly. The driver shook his head. "Not a word, far as I can tell. Just nods and shakes her head when you ask her something. Eats quiet, sleeps quiet. Strange little thing, but polite." Wyatt rubbed his jaw, still staring at her. "You sure this is right? Ain't some mistake?" The driver shrugged. "Letter says you. Name matches. Sides, she don't have nowhere else to go. Folks at the station said she'd been passing through 3 towns already. No one wants to take in a silent girl, I guess." Wyatt sighed, a long sound that came from somewhere deep. "All right," he muttered. "All right, then." He tipped his hat slightly toward the girl. "Come on, little one. Reckon we'll find you something to eat." She didn't answer, of course. Just followed when he turned toward his horse, her small boots kicking up dust. When he offered her a hand to help her onto the saddle, she hesitated, glancing up at him like she was trying to read his intentions. When he gave a small nod, she reached out and let him lift her up, light as a bundle of feathers. The ride back to the ranch was silent. The land stretched out wide and empty, rolling grass, cracked earth, and sky that went on forever. Wyatt could feel the girl's tiny hands gripping the saddle horn tight, her back stiff. She didn't look around, didn't ask where they were going. When they reached the ranch yard, the horses in the corral lifted their heads, and the wind carried the smell of hay and wood smoke. Wyatt swung down first, then helped her dismount. "This here's home," he said simply, nodding toward the house. She stood staring at it. The house was big for one man, but it carried the kind of sadness that clung to old wood. Shutters faded, porch empty. The piano, his late wife's pride, sat by the parlor window, untouched and silent. Inside, he guided her to the kitchen table and poured a glass of milk. She sat quietly, her small hands folded in her lap. "You hungry?" She nodded once. The morning broke slow and quiet like a promise not yet spoken. The sun stretched pale fingers through the fog that clung to the fields outside the Marin Ranch, the light brushing the frost off fence posts and the roof shingles. From the barn came the muffled sound of movement, the rancher going about his chores. The girl, Lila, stood at the window watching him through the wavering glass. She had a blanket draped over her shoulders, her small breath fogging the pain. It had been a week since she arrived. She still hadn't spoken. Wyatt didn't push her. He simply let her move through her days like a quiet shadow, eating when food was set down, following when he walked to the barn, helping when she could. There was no hurry between them, just a rhythm forming in the silence. Wyatt came in from the yard after sunrise, brushing the cold from his sleeves. He found her sitting by the hearth, her small feet tucked under her, feeding sticks into the fire with careful precision. The dog, Huck, rested his head on her lap. "Morning, little one," Wyatt said, setting his hat on the peg. She looked up, nodded slightly, then turned back to the flames. He warmed his hands over the fire. "We'll ride out to the north pasture after breakfast. Fence line needs checking. You think you can handle a ride?" She hesitated, then nodded again. He smiled, that same quiet smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but softened them all the same. Later, when he helped her into the saddle, she clung to the pommel tight, her small frame stiff with nerves. The mare was gentle, a soft-eyed roan named Daisy, and Wyatt made sure to lead her slow. The wind tugged at Lila's hair as they crossed the open land, and for a fleeting moment she smiled. He saw it out of the corner of his eye, just a small, shy curl of her lips, and felt something inside him stir. They spent the morning fixing a broken post, mending wire and gathering fallen branches. Lila fetched nails and tools, steady in her silence but sharp in her attention. When he cut his hand on a splinter, she was there immediately, tearing a strip from her handkerchief and wrapping it around his thumb. He chuckled softly. "You're quick, ain't you?" She shrugged, her cheeks pink in the cold. When they returned to the house that evening, Wyatt went to stoke the fire while she stood again before the piano. The light of sunset poured through the window, painting her face gold. She reached out, touching the keys the way a person might touch holy ground. Wyatt stood in the doorway, watching. Something about the sight of her, so still, so small against that old piano, made the years fold back on him. He could almost see Clara sitting there again, her hands moving gracefully, her laughter echoing through the rafters. He stepped closer. "You remember that song I played the other night?" She turned and nodded slowly. "You want to hear it again?" A pause, then another nod. He sat, his knees creaking a bit, and lifted the lid. The piano gave its faint, dusty sigh. His fingers found the keys, and soon the melody filled the room, halting at first, then stronger, warmer, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. Lila stood beside him, her eyes wide, her fingers twitching as if they wanted to join in but didn't dare. When the song slowed, he stopped and glanced at her. "You ever play?" She hesitated, then lifted her hands, mimicking the shape of pressing keys. Wyatt smiled faintly. "Well, there's no rule says you can't try." He slid aside, making space on the bench. She climbed up carefully, her feet dangling far above the floor. He guided her hands to the middle keys, pressing one gently under her finger. The note rang out, clear and trembling. "See that?" he said softly. "She don't bite." "Go on." Lila pressed another, then another. The sound came uncertain, scattered, but to Wyatt, it was the finest music he'd heard since Clara's laughter had faded from the walls. He began to hum, keeping the rhythm while she pressed keys at random. Slowly, she started matching his tune, shyly, awkwardly, but with a spark of instinct that made him stop and watch. "You've got an ear for it," he murmured. "Clara used to say music's just a kind of talking." only quieter. Her fingers froze. She looked up at him then. Really looked. Her eyes shimmered with something unshed, something breaking open. He realized she was trembling. "Hey," he said gently. "You all right?" Her mouth opened. Just a breath, no sound at first. Then, barely above a whisper, came one word. "Papa." Wyatt froze. The sound hit him like lightning. For a second, he thought he'd imagined it. But when he turned fully toward her, he saw her lips trembling, tears slipping down her cheeks. She looked terrified, as if the word had escaped without her permission. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. What did you say?"
So